Get ready for an inspiring conversation with a true trailblazer in holistic healing. Crystal Robinson is a national board certified health and wellness coach and the founder of Crystal Moon Holistic Healing. Crystal's mission is to simplify wellness by integrating the mind, body, and spirit. But her path to this transformative work is one filled with resilience and personal transformation. What makes this episode even more exciting is the connection that Crystal and I share. We both come from STEM backgrounds, with her having served as a VP of mechanical engineering before making the courageous leap into holistic health coaching. And through her own experiences overcoming PTSD from medical traumas and navigating mental health challenges, Crystal discovered the power of healing and turned it into a fulfilling career. So join us as we dive into her story, her holistic approach to wellness, and how she helps others reclaim their health and happiness through mindfulness, nutrition, and soul-centered coaching. You don't want to miss the wisdom that Crystal is going to share with us today. Hello, Crystal. How are you?
Oh, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an
Yes,
honor.
it's very much an honor for me to speak to a sister who was also a former STEM, in the technology sciences. You were a mechanical engineer and VP at that. How did you go from that and transition into this holistic healer that you are today?
How do I explain that? Okay, so it's very long and involved because this has been kind of my life for 34 years in the engineering realm. But it really stems back all the way to my childhood and where I was and what I wanted to do. And being groomed or pressured into doing a career that aligned with my talents based on my scores in science and math and what my parents wanted, specifically my father at the time. I wanted to be a cosmetologist. I wanted to cut hair and do makeup and do the girl stuff, even though I was very much a tomboy and helped my father build go-karts in the backyard. Um, for me, I did what I was told. Like I wanted to go to a technical school. I wanted to do cosmetology. And I was told, nope, you can go into electronics or drafting. Those are your choices. That's your scores. That's where you're going. You won't make any money doing this. You won't be happy. This is what you have to do. And so I dived in and I was really good at it. And it was really easy and it got really interesting. And at first I went in thinking, oh, I'm going to be an architect. I'm going to design houses and I'm going to do all this amazing stuff. And then I got really bored with it. And I ended up doing for a project was take apart a carburetor and draw all the parts and put it all back together. And that inspired me. I was like, oh, all these little parts and how they move and what they do. And that's kind of what got me into it. And really all of that focus around making things do things and how they work. And because I was so good at it, I just naturally went right into the field. But I did have a little bit of a background where I was rebelling. So I went to night school after I was in the engineering field and got my cosmetology license. And I did nails for people nights and weekends while I did engineering by day until my second child was born. And I
That's
still keep my nail
hilarious.
license today.
That's how
So
you
it was just like,
rebelled.
you know,
That's hilarious.
my dad said I couldn't do it. And I was like, too bad, I'm doing it anyways. But like, I think it's that creative part of me that I feel like I was in a box in the engineering field, right? I was really put in a box. I could be creative, but only so much. And I went right into managing and working with people. And I realized like I really wanted to work with people. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to either be a lawyer or a psychologist, or I just wanted to help people. And going through my traumas and my medical issues and my mental issues, and really dealing with all the things that I dealt with through anaphylactic reactions, through lupus, and through a brain tumor, it woke me up to what my true purpose was. When you have something that happens in your life that's almost life changing, like you feel like you're going to lose your life, when you come out of that, your perspective on everything changes. And that's what happened for me. My perspective changed. And then my dad passed unexpectedly. So it was like, I got whacked in the head one after the other after another. And it was just like, wake up, wake up. This is your calling. Go into your calling. And based on everything I had learned and what I'd done, I wanted to show everybody else how to do these things. I wanted to help other people to bridge the gap between Western medicine and Eastern philosophies. And there's not a lot of people out there that are doing that. And I didn't encounter it. I had to like really search for it. So that's really what pushed me into making the sleep.
Wow, that's awesome. And I'm a mother, so I have 7 children, and I might be a
Ah,
little bit guilty of what your parents did. In the beginning, because I was I'm a computer science major, and I wanted to be a computer science major. My parents were saying, "Oh, you should be a lawyer or something like that." No, I really love programming and things like that. And then I was very successful, at it, even as an entrepreneur. And so I was like, I want all my children to have computer science degrees. And my first son, he actually did it, but my second, she's like, no, I want to be a midwife. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not bad. So all right, I guess so. But I'm at least making them all learn computer science. But I love though that you do so many things. And I love that you excelled like in everything that you did, right? Like you excelled in mechanical engineering. You excelled in your passion originally, in beauty, and now you're helping people. You're doing exactly what you had the passion for in the beginning. And
mm,
I'm really wondering, because I feel like everything was meant to be, that you all of your experiences, they were divinely ordained. I
yeah.
really believe that about everyone. And I just want to ask, like, how you feel your background in the different things that you've done, beauty and engineering, how they have contributed to your current practice as a healer.
Oh, lots of things. Learning how to deal with different personalities, learning how to deal with people, like the beauty part, like dealing with people is can be difficult. Different personalities, different, mindsets. And the beauty part of it was that, and it was doing a service for somebody. And the engineering part, it was working with teams, working with, toxic cultures or toxic work environments. For me, it was working with men all the time. There wasn't very many women in the field of mechanical engineering. Back when I started in the 90s, it was very sparse. For the longest time, there wasn't any women around me. It was all men. So then I had to just understand how to work with men. Going through things like sexual harassment and biases as a woman in this type of field. All of those things, I think, like you said, they trained me organically. Like the fact that I went through all these medical things and it was one thing after another, and I learned something new about my body. I learned something new about medications. I learned something new about nutrition. I learned something new about how spirituality comes involved. And I think that was like my last push was the spirituality connection, because I really didn't have that growing up. I came from a background where church was pushed on me, but my parents didn't do it. They made me go with my grandparents. And it got to a point where I was rebelling against that because I felt like it wasn't organic to our family, because my parents were different denominations, and my grandparents were pushing one thing and my parents weren't doing it at all. And I was just like, I don't want to be involved in any religion. And so I pushed it all away. But then spiritually, I came into my own, and that universe, the divine universe, and the fact that you go through these experiences that makes you grow and become the person you're meant to be, I think is exactly spot on. Like I wouldn't be the person I am if I didn't have those trials and tribulations through my life. And I think that's what makes us who we are and puts us in the positions of where we're supposed to be.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So, how exactly do you help people in their own personal journey?
Well, it depends on what they're looking for. So I work mostly with professionals, people in high stressful situations. And really, it's initially just looking, okay, what are your problems in life right now? What are your pain points? And let's start with those. And sometimes it's their health is tanking, like I had. I was ignoring everything about my body and just diving into everything and doing it all and not paying attention to my body. And my body was keeping the score. That's what was failing as opposed to everything else. But some people, maybe it's their relationships that are failing, or maybe, their minds are starting to fail because they're taking on too much. So I start organically working through like 8 different dimensions of wellness, and your community, your environment, your mental health, your nutrition, all the bits and pieces. And we pick one and we start there based on what the client wants. And we work on creating their life authentically through their own self-worth. Because I found most people come and they want to either work on the career, work on their nutrition, get off of medications, or fix a relationship. But it all comes back to themselves and the love and connection they have with themselves. And I find that that's what I work most with on my clients, working through their shadows, working through their limiting beliefs, what they've been brought up with, what they've been conditioned in. Things like I said, like I was pushed into doing certain things, and then you just kind of go that way, and really starting to shed those layers to find out what is authentically underneath.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. I think that certainly medical doctors, they're not trained to understand how much all of these, you said the 8, I forgot how you said the 8 levels,
Of
dimensions, there you go.
wellness.
Dimensions of wellness. And how these all affect your personal health and healing. But this is truly what it means to, have a holistic approach. So you have a book, and it's called The Change: Insights into Self-Empowerment, Volume 22. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's an anthology. It's an international bestseller. And there is 20 different authors in this book from around the world, all sharing their personal stories of empowerment. And they all range. My story is about my health and what my body did and how it taught me to understand the mind, body, spirit connection. There's other stories in here from people from Australia and Canada and the US and Europe. And it's amazing to read. And if you don't like to read a lot, you can just read one chapter and then you can go back to another chapter later. And it also opens you up to understanding so many different stories and how that impacted people to have empowerment, that so many different things can affect a person in your life. And I love that the movement that this creates, the fact that there's 21 of these and they're working on 23 already. And that there's so many amazing people and so many amazing stories of how people were resilient. And it helps you understand your own resiliency and what you're capable of.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So it's got the story of various people's holistic health and healing journey.
Yeah, and not even just holistic. Sometimes it's just entrepreneurship or, from rock bottom to successful. Some amazing empowerment stories.
Okay, awesome. So wellness can feel overwhelming sometimes, as a lot of people have realized, trying to get well, especially by yourself, or not knowing what to do, or not knowing who to turn to for help. So what are some simple, maybe actionable steps that you'd say that people can take to start beginning their journey, is that right? Toward holistic health?
So for me, I was thrown into the Western medicine world, right? I didn't know much about what was available outside of that. It was whatever the doctors say is what you do. You take this medication. This is how you solve this. This is how you solve that. And I realized as I got older how many things were happening in my life and how unexplained they were, or undiagnosed they were, or, odd they were. I got anaphylactic reaction to multiple foods in my 30s, which is crazy that you get those things happen. And that's because your body's telling you something is not balanced in your body. And I didn't understand that. I just went with what they told me. And it wasn't until I really hit a rock bottom, having numerous anaphylactic reactions in a year, and ended up in a hospital for like 6 days because of the epi and how it all affected my body and my heart, and literally afraid I was going to die over the anaphylactic reaction and the epi and how that worked in my body, that I realized what I was doing wasn't helping. So I started reaching outside. And that's when I met with a holistic nutritionist that was well known in this area, that somebody had introduced me to. And I had never heard of him. I heard that then once I found out about him, I found out that he had helped millions of people with cancers and other issues in their bodies just by connecting back to nature and holistically taking care of themselves. And I worked with him for 10 years. And then I trained with him and learned what he did so that I could help other people. And it really was coming down to what you put in your body. And it's not just the food or the liquids, it's the environment. It's what you listen to, it's what you look at, it's what you're subjected to, your energy. It's all of those things. And really actually opening yourself up to learning that the medical establishment is there if you break an arm or get a collapsed lung, or in my case, I had a brain tumor, and I wasn't holistically going to heal that at that point. But I think that it was created because I was so out of balance for so many years. And this is where this trouble that you have in your body goes when you're not dealing with all your issues, your mental, your physical, and your emotional, your spiritual. It ends up in your body somehow. It manifests as tumors, as illness, as cancer, as all of those things. And it really took me going through numerous ones to realize my body's yelling at me that I have to completely change what I'm doing in my lifestyle. So if I was to tell somebody how to start, connecting with what you're putting in your body, that's a great way to start. Literally ask everything that you look at and that you go to put in your body, is this good for me? Is this sustaining? Is this going to, help me? A lot of people make excuses that I'm going to eat this because it makes me feel better. Well, is it really going to make your gut feel better? Is it really going to help all those systems in your body work better? And, listening to certain music or surrounding yourself with certain people that are always down or judgmental, what is that doing to your overall life? How do you feel? Just start questioning everything and taking a step back and like looking at your life. What can I change? What little thing can I change? Maybe it's what I eat for breakfast. Maybe it's that I have a gratitude practice. Or maybe I just learned to stop and breathe. Take a few breaths before I react, before I say something. And those are the first steps you take. And as you do more and more, you will find that they spread throughout your life. One little gratitude practice turns into being more positive, being less judgmental, and having really solid conversations with people.
Beautiful. And yeah, I'm so into that. Just your whole holistic approach and how you just touched on a lot of different things that really need to be part of the package when you're trying to be healthy, but also especially when you're trying to heal yourself. Now, I know that you talk about shadow work and embracing one's shadows to unlock potential. So, how has this played a role in your own healing, and how do you help others through this process of shadow work?
So for myself, regarding the shadow work, it was something I didn't understand. I didn't even know about until I really started studying. And I worked with Deepak Chopra's group and became a total well-being coach through Deepak Chopra's group. And that's when I really understood the process of going through your shadow work. And really what that is it's the things about other people that push your buttons, that make you crazy. That and why? Why does it make you crazy? Why does it bother you so much? Why does it make you react? Because there's something about you that you do that's so similar to that you don't like. And that's why you become reactive, because you're judging someone else, which means you're judging yourself. And then you're not good enough. It comes back to that self-love. Ultimately, that's what the shadow work is. And for me, I knew that I was dealing with all those self-love issues, those not good enough, that no matter what I did, no matter how high I climbed that corporate ladder, no matter how many children I had, no matter what my house was or what my car was, I still didn't feel whole or worthy. There was something missing in what I was doing. And that was really coming down to those inner child things that you have to work through. Why do I have these shadows? Why do I not accept these things about myself? Why am I judgmental? So I worked with a client even today regarding shadow work, and it was on little things. We just said, okay, we got to start at something small. And it was that self-talk where you really get negative about yourself and knocking something over and then being, oh, you're an idiot. Why'd you do that? Instead of just picking it up and putting it back and being like, oh, I was just moving a little too fast and not paying attention. Next time I'll slow down, right? That's the difference that shadow work will do for you, to really look at, are you judging people because they're moving too fast and not paying attention? They're being clumsy. They're cutting you off in traffic. They're doing certain things because they're not present and they're not really with you having a conversation or paying attention to people around them. And when you do those things, you automatically get triggered because you're like, oh, I'm not worthy. I'm doing the things that I can't stand about other people. And it's taking those things and having the compassion for it, that, okay, there's a reason, right? Oh, that person cut me off because maybe their mother's in the hospital, right? It's looking at those things. I wasn't paying attention because I was running late and my kid was yelling for me in the other room. And so I knocked that thing over. Have compassion. Okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to slow down a little bit. I'm going to get to it. But these things happen. And having compassion for yourself actually has you look at those shadows in other people. Like I said about that person cutting you off, like maybe there's a reason for it. And when you start questioning and being curious, it completely changes your judgments. It changes everything that you look at, from knocking something over to, somebody getting in a massive car accident because they were careless, right? You can question everything and have compassion for those reasons those things might have happened. And that's really where the shadow work is rooted. And something small is where we start and we just work through it. And it's something that you work through for a lifetime. Every day, something different might come up and you'll be like, oh, well, why is that bothering me? And then you can start questioning it.
That's awesome. So I'm just wondering why is it called shadow work?
Because it's deep and dark and we don't like it.
Mm.
So it's the shadow, it's the dark and the light, right? The stuff we like about ourselves is when we're, brilliant and doing all the right things, but we're doing the wrong things. We call that the dark parts of us. That's why it's called shadow. But it's part of us. We are whole with all our light, dark, and grays in the middle. And that's where society has kind of trained us to not like those things. And then that's where we go back into the self-love and the compassion for those things about us that make us who we are, that, maybe we're constantly working on them. And that's what makes us human.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? You explained something that's actually a fundamental principle that I know is, at least in both Christianity and Judaism, this idea that, when you see something wrong in someone else, it could be a reflection of something that you also have problems with or struggle with and things like that. And in order to have compassion on other people and get less triggered, etc., you have to also recognize it within yourself and have compassion and empathy for yourself. And I think that a lot of people miss that. There's always an emphasis on forgive others, but what about forgiving yourself, right? And what about having compassion for yourself? And some people think that this kind of talk is selfish, but that only really just encourages the or prevents us from healing from these types of issues within ourselves. So I love that you make that connection and point that out.
I think it's actually imperative that you do it yourself. I think it comes back to that self-love, because even if you're looking at it, they maybe call it mirror work in other places as opposed to shadow work, right? When you're seeing something in somebody else. But if you're only forgiving others and you're never forgiving yourself, the judgment will always be there on others. If you're judging yourself, you will always judge others. So in order to not judge others, you have to not judge yourself. It's kind of like a band-aid that you're putting on it by forgiving, but you're not wholeheartedly doing it, because when you see somebody else do the same thing, you're still going to judge. It's when you forgive it and not judge it in yourself that then you stop judging it others and wonder, oh, maybe they have something going on that makes them testy with me today. I
Yeah.
wonder what's going on, as opposed to, oh, why is that person such a jerk? It's just like, those are the things that happen. And that's the journey.
I almost feel like that is often sometimes what a lot of religious leaders overlook, where I feel like it's all the emphasis is always on being nice to others, forgiving others, not realizing that people struggle with being nice to themselves. And how can you love others if you don't love yourself? How can you forgive others if you can't forgive yourself? That's the most important person in your life, is yourself, you know?
Yeah, it comes down to, that old adage that you hear about the stewardesses and the mask in the airplane. Like, you have to put your mask on first before you can help others. So no matter what, it comes down to you. You can only control you. No matter how much forgiveness or empathy you give others, if you're not controlling you and giving yourself all that empathy or all that compassion or forgiveness, then what difference does that make with how you treat others? How is that going to come out of you? And I think it's true when you say it's in a lot of religions that they don't go to the individual, they just go to the outward actions. But when you fix inside, the actions are organic. You don't have to control them anymore, because they come from within, they come from the love. They come from the non-judgment and the positivity, because that love is there inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if we could go back to your book again and your mission as well, what do you hope readers take away from your chapter in the book, and how does it connect to your larger mission as a coach and a healer?
So my original mission was to help people learn to listen to their bodies, listen to all the things that are within them so they don't get a brain tumor. I wanted to help people not get a brain tumor. It was like the collective. How do I collectively help people not end up where I was? And looking at my story and seeing all the catalysts that were happening, all the big signs, all the, slaps in the face or whatever you want to call them, that were happening all along my life, that it wasn't listening to, that it wasn't paying attention, that it wasn't diving deeper into, until I got the brain tumor. And I had started doing the work, like I was there, but I was doing like the physical work. I was doing the nutrition and the working out and taking care of my body, but I wasn't taking care of my mind. And then when I started taking care of my mind and dealing with the shadow stuff, and then I was missing the spiritual element, and then adding that spiritual element, and now I'm lupus free. Like you say, that's not curable. Well, here I am.
That's awesome. So you're lupus free, and what about your brain tumor and the anaphylactic shocks?
So the anaphylactic, I haven't had an anaphylactic shock in many, 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 many years at this point. I went through a year where I was in the hospital, I think 6 times in the same year. And then I would have problems after problems. And that also led to panic attacks and anxiety over all that PTSD from having those, episodes where I couldn't breathe and my throat was closing and I having to use epi and those things. And the brain tumor, I had 27 staples. I had an amazing surgeon take it out. It was right behind my left eye. It was bigger than a golf ball. They discovered it, and that's when it was already that big. It wasn't discovered early enough to really do healing modalities that would do something. It was causing micro seizures already in my face. And it was something they were like, when they discovered it, they were like, it needs to come out right away. So it was like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they took it out. And, they opened up my skull. It was scary, super scary. But amazing doctor, amazing neurosurgeon, amazing people. And I had a great mindset going in. And I think it was from dealing with all the other things that I knew that my mindset had to be, this is just another thing on my road. It's just another bump, another pothole. I'm from Massachusetts. We got lots of potholes that I have to just deal with. And I'm going to be okay. And no matter what comes out of it, if I die on the operating table, I've made sure everything's taken care of for my family. If I come out and I can't talk, I'll deal with it. If I come out and I can't move the same way, I'll deal with it. I wasn't in that place where I was a victim of it. But I was there with the lupus. I really was a victim of the diagnosis, of the medications for quite a while. I just lived in it, and it got worse. When you live in that, you do get worse. And I had learned this was like the universe just putting one thing after another and throwing it at me. And so now, no more brain tumor, no relapse. It wasn't cancerous. It was just my body collecting all the stuff that I had shoved away for so long and didn't use my voice and didn't heal and didn't work through the traumas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important piece. And I don't think people understand this is that, if you get your cancer cut out, or if you take some kind of medication to lower, forcibly lower your blood pressure or lower your cholesterol or whatever it is, you are not addressing the root cause. And even if you're, like you said, even if you're taking supplements or herbs, or even if you're changing your diet, you are still not addressing the root cause, because the root cause is very often, I would say the majority of the time, is going to be something rooted in something mindset and spiritual related. And because of the mindset and spiritual aspect, then you don't eat right, or then you can't control your emotions, or et cetera, et cetera. You don't get the help you need, or trust the process so that you can effectively go through it. And so, healing really starts in the mind. So I believe that what you're doing is so important, and that people who don't work on their mind and on their spirit, they oftentimes do not succeed in the long run, even if, let's say, even if they do get the operation, right? Or even if they get holistic treatment and they cure themselves. But if they don't work on their mind and their spirit, then that means that they're going to recreate the same kind of environment that they had that created their illness in the first place, which means they're going to recreate their illness again, which is why, some people after cancer treatment, whether it's holistic or conventional, it comes back, but some people it doesn't come back, because you can cut it away, but you're going to regrow it if you don't change the inside of you.
I agree. That was exactly my story. One thing after another, and I had to keep adding to what I was doing. And it wasn't until I incorporated the mind, body, and spirit, all three pieces of it, which is what I do with my clients, which is why I think it's so important for people to understand. I was only doing two pieces of it, and then I got a brain tumor. Before that, I was only doing one piece of it. So then I got lupus, and it was one thing after another. And when I started doing all three, now I don't take any medications. I don't take any supplements. I'm very careful about what I eat, but I cheat, right? I do have treats here and there. I do, drink once in a while. I do things that, they would say, oh, you're not like the healthiest person. But for the majority of what I do the work. I make sure that majority of what goes into my body is healthy. I make sure the majority of what I'm around is healthy. I make sure that when I am triggered or I have these reactions, that I question them. And my body will tell me. I make sure I listen to my body. When I don't question them, maybe my fingers will start hurting or my wrist will start hurting. And it's like, oh, the lupus is like yelling at me. And I'm like, oh, what did you not process over the last 24, 48 hours that brought up? What are you not addressing? And I literally think about that and I go back and there'll be something that I wasn't dealing with, something that I did, something I said, something somebody else said that had an effect on me. And I work through it and I think about it and I'm like, okay, well, why? Why is that? Why is my body yelling at me? Okay, you don't want to store this in your body. You don't want to create another tumor. You need to work through, is it a shadow? Is it a limiting belief? Is it a worth thing, a self-worth thing? You know, that's the work. So I love that you agree with the mind, body, spirit thing, because it's what I do and it's what I want everybody to understand. This is how you don't get a brain tumor.
I love it. I'm a very religious person. I'm Jewish, and in both, at least I know in the Christian and Jewish worlds, there's a lot of stigma associated to being sick, and it's often seen as like, oh, I'm being punished, and it's something negative. I'm being cursed. I did something wrong. I'm a sinner, therefore I'm sick, and et cetera, et cetera. But I love the way how you kind of like flip the switch, and you kind of, in a way, you agree that there's something that we need to do if we are sick, but it's not in a place of that we need to feel guilty or bad or horrible about ourselves, but instead it's like seeing the illness as a gift and seeing our symptoms as communication between our body and our inner healer, our true selves, so that instead of having guilt, which is not going to be a little bit, of course, is natural, but we don't want to dwell on that, certainly, and instead seeing these symptoms and these problems and these illnesses as just ways that our body is trying to communicate with us, so that we can reflect on our lives and do what you call shadow work, do that inner work. And I just think that's a beautiful way just to approach life and to approach symptoms of any kind, whatever you're facing, whether it be emotional, physical, mental, spiritual illnesses, just to take these signs and symptoms as as your body's speaking, we're just wanting to communicate with you. And sometimes it communicates, sometimes we have to yell, we have to yell, we have to raise our voice sometimes just to be heard, right? But that doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything negative being intended with that kind of communication. Sometimes we just need a loud enough signal, and it translates to brain tumor, or it translates to fatigue, and your body's trying to tell you maybe you need a rest, maybe you need to change this or that.
I agree. That's totally how I feel about it. And now I listen, but I didn't used to, and that's kind of what my chapter in the change is all about. It's all of these little things that I wasn't listening to and I was ignoring. And, I probably could have prevented some of the things that happened if I wasn't ignoring what my body was trying to tell me. So the biggest thing I try to help people do is come back into your body. Most people are living outside of themselves. They're living for tomorrow or from the past. They're not living in the now, being present in the right now, in this body, in this experience. And that makes a huge difference when you go forward, because you can't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And what's in the past, all you can do is learn from it. Take the lessons with you. That's it. You can't go back there. And if you're present and you listen, you can get so much healing out of that. So much wisdom just right inside your own heart and your own mind and your spirit.
Absolutely. Well, I could definitely ask you a million more questions and go deeper into a lot of the profound things that you've been saying, but As our time is coming to a close, I wanted to just reiterate your book site again, your book and your website. Your book is called Change Insights into Self-Empowerment by Crystal Robinson. And also your website is crystalmoonholistichealing.com, a beautiful name. And you're also on Instagram, Crystal Moon Healing, and Facebook, Crystal Moon Holistic Healing, also LinkedIn as Crystal Robinson. And so as we, end our time together, what would be just one closing thought, one closing message that you would say to the world?
Stop, take a breath, come back to you. Everything can be very simple in all the chaos that's going around us. And pull yourself away from the chaos and come back inside and listen and say, okay, what's one small thing that I can do right now to help myself? Maybe that's just taking a breath. Maybe that's closing your eyes. Maybe that's resting. Really start listening to what is inside. Come back to you.